The wind moaned low through the pines like something dying. Elias Cutter stood motionless in the snow, axe dangling at his side, steam ghosting from his mouth as he watched the tree lean. 30 winters alone had sharpened his senses into something feral. He could smell blood beneath the frost, feel shifts in air before they moved. What approached now? He'd felt it hours before the sound of crunching steps. He didn't move as they emerged. 10 of them, women, wrapped in worn hides, their feet swaddled in strips of torn cloth, hair long and wind-whipped, eyes sharp, black as river stones. Apache, no mistaking it. The kind of arrival that once would have roused him to reach for his rifle. But Elias had grown tired of reasons to kill. And something in the way they walked, heads high despite exhaustion, forming a wall around the smallest among them, made him lower the axe instead. The one in front stopped a few paces short of the porch. Her presence didn't shout. It settled. She looked no older than 40, but her eyes carried decades. She spoke in Spanish, quiet and firm. "We will work. We ask only for fire and roof." Elias said nothing. He took them all in, scanning for threats by old instinct. No weapons he could see. One of the women leaned against another, limping, her leg crusted with blood. Another clutched a wrapped bundle against her chest. Too still to be a baby, too small to be tools. Dead, perhaps, or dying. "You're not welcome," he said at last. His voice was gravel. Not angry, just the sound of stone refusing water. The woman didn't flinch. She tilted her chin toward the cabin behind him. "The land will remember if you turn us away." That made him blink. A flash of something buried surfaced. His wife once spoke like that, before she and their boy vanished into the fire of old wars. But he pushed it down like everything else. "There's the shed." He gestured toward the small lean-to beyond the corral. "Won't stop the wind, but it's dry. You can stay the night." The woman gave a slight nod. "No thanks." No expression. She turned, relayed the word in Apache, and the group moved as one. Silent, practiced, wounded but not broken. Elias stood on the porch long after they disappeared into the dim. Snow began falling again, soft and slow like ash. He watched until their shapes blurred, then went inside, bolting the door behind him. His fire was low. He didn't feed it. He sat in the dark. That night, he didn't sleep. He kept hearing something, a soft, wet groan beneath the wind. Not an animal. Not human either. Something in between. At one point, a low scream rose up and vanished just as quick. He knew better than to go look. There were some pains a man had no right to witness. By morning, the wind had stopped. He walked to the shed with 2 thick wool blankets and a handful of jerky wrapped in canvas. The snow around the lean-to was trampled, stained rust-red in places. Smoke curled from a buried fire pit. One of the women knelt beside a bundle wrapped in deer hide, rocking slow, her face unreadable. Nearby, another woman wiped blood from her hands using the hem of her skirt. She looked up at Elias as he approached, but didn't speak, didn't move. He placed a bundle on a dry stump and turned without a word. The door creaked behind him as he left. Later that day, he saw them hanging cedar branches and burning sage. The smoke drifted in patterns. They sang in low voices, threading song through wind and earth, weaving themselves into the place like they'd always belonged. It made Elias uneasy. He'd carved a hard edge around his life, and now something was softening the corners without his permission. Days passed. They made no demands. They fished the creek even though it bit like ice, gathered bark for teas, cleared brush along his fence line without being asked. One of them, the youngest, no more than 16, fixed his roof without saying a word. He found her up there at dusk, hammering with steady hands. He almost told her to get down, but stopped himself. She was good at it, better than he'd been. One morning, he found his axe clean sharpened, leaning neatly against the woodpile. His boots had been mended. The gash in the barn door, there for 7 winters, was patched with precision. Still, he didn't ask names, didn't offer his. There was a silence between them that felt agreed upon. Then came the snowstorm. It rolled over the mesa at noon, swallowing light. Elias barely made it back to the cabin before it hit. Wind howling like a dying god, trees bending like old men in prayer. He waited out by the fire, listening for signs the shed might collapse. It held. Somehow, by morning it was gone. The world outside looked scoured, white and bare and blinding. He walked the path to the shed expecting stillness. Instead, he saw a cradle, made from woven saplings and rabbit hide. Inside it, a child, red-faced, dark-haired, wailing with lungfuls of life. Elias stared, throat tight. Behind the child stood the woman who'd first spoken to him. She said nothing, just met his eyes. He saw it then. Not just a child, but what the women had done, what they'd built in days. A world inside a ruin. He crouched, reaching into his coat, pulled out an old tin. Inside, 3 rounds of tobacco, wrapped in wax paper. He placed it gently beside the cradle. A gift, nothing more. The woman gave the faintest nod. That night, he lit a second fire in the main room, unbolted the door. The air shifted. He still didn't know their names. But he knew he was no longer alone. And for the first time in 30 winters, Elias Cutter didn't feel like a ghost. He felt like a man watching something be born. Something he might be part of, or might have to protect. Either way, the wind had changed, and it wasn't done blowing. Spring came slow and shy, as if the mountains still mistrusted warmth. Snow peeled back from a ridge like an old scab, revealing dirt so dry it cracked under breath. The creek, once frozen glass, now ran sullen and brown, carrying secrets loosened by thaw. Elias Cutter moved through it all like a man stirring from a long, dreamless sleep. He no longer spoke to himself out loud. There were ears now, eyes, lives unfolding beside his own. The women had not left, nor had they asked permission to stay. They simply remained, woven into the bones of the ranch like roots twisting beneath floorboards. Every day, they made themselves necessary, and every night, Elias found it harder to imagine a place without them. The one he now thought of as a girl on the roof, her name turned out to be Kiona, was everywhere at once, fixing broken saddles. Taming the feral goat Elias had given up trying to pan. She laughed rarely, but worked like she was chasing something no one else could see. Then there was the elder, the one who'd spoken first. Elias learned her name by accident, overhearing it spoken by another while hanging a deer carcass. Nalin. Her voice was like river stone, smooth from time and pressure. She rarely touched anything twice. Her hands knew how to mend things, blankets, bones, even silence. When Elias split a knuckle skinning the buck, she took his hand without asking. He tensed at her touch, but let it happen. Her fingers smelled of smoke and sage. "You carry ghosts," she said while dabbing his wound. "They carry me," he muttered. She met his eyes. "They don't have to." They didn't talk much after that. But something had shifted. A quiet trust born of survival, not affection. Elias had once mistaken the two. He wouldn't again. The work kept him busy. Soil needed turning. Roof beams needed resealing. The ranch had always held together through brute effort, but now it was being shaped with care. There were moments Elias would pause, breath caught in his throat, watching the women gather wild herbs or tend the earth with practiced reverence. They didn't own the land, but it responded to them as if it remembered them. One afternoon, Kiona brought him a bundle wrapped in hide. Inside were black seeds, long and narrow like slivers of coal. 3 sisters, she said. Corn, beans, squash. Plant them together. They guard each other. Elias had never gardened in his life. He did it anyway. That night by firelight, he opened a long-shut drawer and pulled out a faded photograph, his son, no more than 6, sitting bareback on a pony, wild-haired, grinning like mischief. He placed it on the mantel, unsure what compelled him. When he turned, he found Nalin watching from the doorway. "I knew him," she said. His knees went weak. "You knew?" She stepped closer, slow, like approaching a skittish animal. "He lived with an elder woman from my band for a season, before the soldiers came. He had your eyes." Elias gripped the chair back until the wood groaned. "He died." Nalin hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know." The fire cracked. For a moment, nothing moved but shadow. "He'd be near 25 now," Elias whispered. Or more. He may still walk, she said, but not in this place. The land here forgets half-bloods fast. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He stood outside until the moon buried itself behind the ridge. The cold helped him think, but not clearly. 2 days later, the sheriff came. Booth rode up slow, dust on his hat brim, his horse lean and twitchy. He dismounted without ceremony, eyes flicking toward the shed where 2 women wove baskets. "You're keeping company now?" he asked, not bothered with pleasantries. Elias didn't answer. Booth spat into the dirt, word spreading. "Folks say you're harboring redskins. Say you lost your damn mind. Let 'em talk." "You think they'll stop a talk?" Booth narrowed his gaze. "Harlan Bishop found his barn burned last week. Says it was vengeance. Says he saw feathers left on the post." Elias grunted. "Bishop's a liar and a drunk. Burned his own barn trying to kill frostbite with whiskey. Maybe. Doesn't matter. Folks want them gone. They'll come for 'em, and if they find you standing in the way..." "They'll try," Elias said. His voice had steel in it again. He hadn't heard that tone in himself for years. Booth looked him over, saw the old war lines on the beard, the stillness of a man who'd once killed without flinching. He sighed. "You can't protect them forever." Elias glanced toward the ridge. The sun hung low, casting long red light over the earth. "Just long enough," he said. Booth mounted up, paused. "I knew your boy. Briefly. Ran messages for my outfit once. Carried a medicine pouch around his neck. Said his mother gave it to him." Elias blinked, stunned. "He was quick," Booth added. "Had your jaw." Then he rode off, vanishing into dust. That evening, Elias sat outside the cabin, sharpening his blade. Keona approached with a bowl of cactus stew, her eyes wary. "You're expecting trouble," she said. "It's already coming." She sat beside him. "You could tell us to leave." "I could." She waited. He looked at her, then back at the fading sun. "But then I'd be what I was before. And I ain't keen on going back to that." Keona offered him the stew. He took it. Later, Nalin joined him by the fire. She placed a feather in the flames, turkey, brown, and pale striped. "For protection," she said. "You believe in that?" "I believe in what people become when they're believed in." The sky that night was clear, stars sharp and cold above them. Elias watched the flames burn down to coals, and for the first time since the women arrived, he felt something stronger than guilt rising in his chest. He felt resolve. And in the distance, beyond the tree line, a pair of eyes watched them, silent, waiting. Not all storms wore clouds. Some came on horseback, and they were getting close. It began with poison. The corn shoots, barely knee-high, curled in on themselves overnight, leaves blackened, earth sour with rot. Elias stood over the garden in silence, boots sunk in damp soil, heart heavy as stone. Nalin joined him without a word, squatting low to touch the dirt. Her nostrils flared. She didn't need to speak. He knew the smell. Lye, maybe kerosene, maybe worse. They had been marked. Later that morning, a crude bundle appeared on the fence line, animal bones strung with twine, hung from a post like a curse. A tuft of Keona's braid knotted into it. Elias took it down without a word and burned it in the fire pit. Keona watched, jaw clenched, cheeks hollow with rage. No one cried. That, more than anything, frightened him. They moved through the next days like ghosts preparing for war. Nalin painted ash symbols over the doorframes. The women reinforced the shed with thick timber and sharpened fence posts. Elias hauled water from the creek at night, not trusting the barrels near the barn. Even the goats had grown restless, bleating at shadows that hadn't yet taken shape. Elias hadn't touched a rifle in years. Now he cleaned 3 by lamplight, oiling the bolts with fingers steadier than he expected. Muscle remembered. Memory never really left. That part of him, buried beneath layers of quiet, returned like a dog to its old master. He still didn't want to kill again, but he would. 2 nights later, Keona didn't return from checking snares. They found her by the bluff, bleeding from a gash along her ribs. Someone had strung wire across the path. Meant for deer, meant for warning. Elias carried her back himself, boots slipping in the brush, jaw clenched so hard his molars ached. Nalin worked fast, silent as ever, stitching skin with practiced hands, while Kiona bit down on a carved stick to muffle her pain. "She'll live," Nalin said when it was done. "She's 16, Elias growled. "She should have been spared all this." "No one spared," Nalin replied. "Not anymore." Elias said nothing. He stood, walked out into the dark, and didn't come back until dawn. When he returned, his boots were muddy and his eyes hollow, but his shoulders were squared again. The driftwood of who he'd been had begun to harden back into timber. He didn't speak of what he saw beyond the ridge, but his rifle never left his side after that. The next day, he found a letter nailed to the barn. Sloppy script, written in black grease. "Red Jack's coming. He remembers you, asterisk, asterisk." The name sat in his belly like rusted iron. Red Jack Hanley. Once his friend. Once a brother in arms. Then a thief, a liar, and finally a murderer. Elias had left him bleeding in a ravine 10 years back. Thinking that was the end of it. Should have known better. Ghosts didn't die easy out here. They just found new coats to wear. "He's coming for me," Elias told Nalin that evening. "But he'll bleed everyone else on the way." She nodded. "Then we prepare." "No," he said. "You leave. All of you. Tonight. I'll buy you the time." But Nalin didn't move. Her gaze was sharp, unflinching. "We are already exiled," she said. "There is nowhere to return to. You don't understand who he is. I understand what you are." She stepped closer, voice low but firm. "A man trying to pay for sins by dying in place of others. That isn't redemption. That's surrender." The words struck deeper than he expected. He turned away, jaw tight. The fire crackled between them. "If we fight," he said, "some of you will die." "Some already have," Nalin answered. "The question is, will it matter?" They planned in hushed voices. Kiona, despite the stitches, insisted on helping. Her eyes had changed, no longer the girl from the roof, but a hawk waiting to strike. The other women moved like water, flowing into roles without need for order. They set traps, dug shallow trenches, packed stones into baskets for throwing. Elias taught them how to set a firing arc, how to line powder along a fuse. He showed Nalin how to shoot. She learned fast. But still, he hated the feel of it. Steel and smoke and blood on the air before it even began. He watched them move with grim pride and deep sorrow. They had made a home here, in the bones of his exile. Now it would be tested by fire. The night before the storm, he sat alone under the stars. The mountains loomed black and solemn. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, short and sharp, like a warning. Elias pulled the old photograph from his coat. His boy stared back with a crooked smile, wind in his hair. He might still walk, Nalin had said. Elias didn't know what to hope for anymore, but he knew what he would not allow. Red Jack would not burn this place. Not again. Footsteps approached. Nalin settled beside him, wrapped in a blanket of smoked hide. She said nothing at first. Then, "You were not always alone." "No." "Then why did you choose to be?" He considered that for a long time. "Because the land doesn't ask questions, doesn't judge. It just lets you disappear." She nodded, then leaned forward and placed something in his hand. It was a medicine pouch, leather, beaded with green and red stones, worn at the edges. "My son wore one," he said quietly. "I know." This was his. He looked at her, startled. "I found it on the ridge years ago," she said. "Didn't know it belonged to you until I saw the photo." He closed his fingers around it, felt the pull of time snap, taut inside him. "I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he's still out there. Maybe he's not. But if he was, he'd want you to fight for something." Elias nodded, his throat thick. Behind them, firelight danced in the windows. The women slept in shifts, blades near their beds, children wrapped in blankets. There was no fear in them anymore, only resolve. The stars spun on, and in the dark beneath the ridge, horses gathered. Spurs gleamed. Guns were loaded. Red Jack's men rode with the silence of wolves. The storm would break by dawn, and the mountain would remember every drop of blood. Before dawn, The land held its breath. Mist drifted low over the gulch, brushing the tall grass like fingers testing for weakness. The fire had been buried hours ago, coals dark under ash. Elias crouched behind the woodpile with his rifle balanced across his knees, breath shallow, eyes scanning the tree line. Nalin moved silently behind him, bow slung across her shoulder, her face painted with ash and ochre, not for war, but for mourning in advance. They didn't speak. The traps had been laid, pits camouflaged, stones stacked behind the cabin for throwing, fuse lines buried in dirt like serpents waiting to spit flame. The women were scattered in the thickets, hiding places chosen with precision. Kiona lay prone on the bluff, rifle steady, one arm still bound from the snare wound. Her eyes were calm. She looked like she'd been born for this moment. When the hooves came, they sounded like thunder swallowed by the earth. 6 riders at first, then 10. Red Jack led them, his horse a dappled gray, hooves coated in red dust, like it had galloped straight out of hell. He was leaner than Elias remembered, but the grin was the same, wide, crooked, cruel. A scar cut down his right cheek now, a gift from some other fire. He wore a red coat that flapped like a banner. Behind him, one man rode wearing a coat Elias recognized. It was his son's, worn, faded, but still intact. A medicine pouch hung from the saddle horn, bobbing with every step. Something inside Elias cracked, then fused into iron. The men rode slow into the clearing, rifles held low, arrogance thick in their posture. Red Jack raised a hand, signaling halt. The horses snorted, uneasy. One of them caught scent of the traps, ears flicking. Elias cut her. Jack shouted, "You old bastard, come out and let's talk like civilized ghosts." Elias didn't move. "Not yet." Nalin touched his arm. "He wants fear." "He'll get fire," Elias muttered. Then Kiona's shot cracked the silence. One of the riders pitched backward off his horse, skull open like a melon. Chaos bloomed. Shouting, panic rearing, horses screaming. The second trap sprang, spikes snapping up from the dirt like fangs. Another man fell, howling, leg pinned and bleeding. Elias stepped from behind the woodpile, calm as snow. His rifle barked once, one clean shot, and a third man dropped, his gun still half raised. Red Jack wheeled his horse, laughing. "There's the cutter I remember." Bullets tore bark from trees. The cabin wall splintered. Nalin loosed an arrow and vanished into the scrub. The women moved like smoke, appearing, striking, disappearing. A man stumbled from the barn with a torch and found the door rigged with powder. The explosion sent him tumbling into the trough, burning. Still they kept coming. Jack's men, angry now, less cautious. They fired wildly, screamed threats, tried to flank wide around the creek. Elias moved through it all like he'd never left the war. He shot to wound when he could, but when he couldn't, he didn't hesitate. This land had been soaked in blood before. It would survive more. Then Jack charged the cabin. 2 of his men fell in the approach, but he didn't slow. He dismounted mid-run and rolled behind the trough, firing 3 shots through the window. Elias ducked low, heart pounding. Jack's voice rang out again. "This ain't about them women, Cutter. It's about you and me." Elias stepped to the back door, flanked wide, and came around the side, catching Jack mid-reload. "You always were loud," Elias said, rifle raised. Jack grinned. "You always were slow." He dove behind the rain barrel as Elias fired. The shot missed by inches. Jack returned fire, nicked Elias along the ribs. Blood bloomed but didn't slow him. They circled the yard like wolves, old grudges burning hot in their chests. Jack called out, voice like rust, "Your boy cried when I took that pouch off him. You remember how he sounded?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. He closed the distance fast, dropped his rifle and drew the knife at his belt, an old Bowie, stained dark with time. Jack met him with a howl, blade in hand. Steel flashed, blades caught and scraped. Elias moved with tired fury, not fast, but heavy, deliberate. Jack was younger, quicker, but reckless. Their bodies slammed against the cabin wall, fists flying, breath coming in gasps. Nalin appeared from the shadows. Arrow knocked. She had the shot. "Don't." Elias rasped, "He's mine." Jack lunged again, caught Elias in the shoulder. Blood slicked the handle. Elias twisted, drove the blade into Jack's side. Jack gasped, stunned, but still grinning even as his knees buckled. "Just like old times," he coughed. Elias caught him as he fell, eased him to the ground. "It's over," he said. Jack laughed once, blood in his teeth, and died staring at the sky. Silence returned slowly, as if uncertain the storm had truly passed. One of Jack's men rode off. Another dropped his weapon and fled into the woods. The rest were dead or dying. Elias staggered to the porch, blood soaking his shirt. Nalin helped him sit. She said nothing, only held a cloth to his side. Kiona came down from the ridge, face streaked with soot. She knelt beside Elias and pressed the medicine pouch into his hand. "Wasn't his," she said, "was yours all along." Elias nodded. "Eyes stinging." Hours passed. The women tended the wounded, some of Jack's men among them. Burial mounds rose by the bluff. No names, just stones and quiet prayers. Sheriff Booth arrived near dusk, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the carnage. "You do this?" he asked Elias. "With help." Booth looked around, at the women gathering water, at the repaired fence line, at the blood in the dirt, and nodded slowly. "You keeping the land?" "I am." "They staying?" "They are." Booth tipped his hat. "Then I didn't see nothing." He rode off, leaving only hoof prints in the dust. That night, they lit a new fire. Elias sat by it with the baby in his arms. Nalin's niece, born the first night the women arrived. The child blinked up at the stars, wide-eyed and quiet. Nalin sat beside him. Kiona laughed somewhere in the distance. The cabin door swung gently in the breeze. Elias looked out over the land, no longer haunted. "Not alone anymore," he said softly. The fire crackled. The mountain listened. And for the first time in 30 winters, it was at peace.